Man, it feels like Miami does this each and every year now. They have a really hyped up team in the preseason, many think they can finally get it done, they show glimpse, and then in the last moment, they end up failing. Miami was first brought into the ACC in 2004 with the goal of having them become the premier program in the conference due to their football dominance in their history. By the time 2010 came around though, they hadn't even made an appearance in the ACC championship game, mostly because the two coaches they had, Larry Coker and Randy Shannon, weren't all that good at winning with talent. They went 2-4 in bowls and never finished any higher than second in the Coastal Division. In 2011, the Miami program was facing issues on more than just the football field though. A prominent Miami booster by the name of Nevin Shapiro had been convicted of a Ponzi scheme and was sentenced to 20 years in prison. The investigation into this Ponzi scheme revealed that he had illegally sent money and gifts to 20 Miami football players, including quarterback Ja'Cory Harris, receiver Travis Benjamin, and linebacker Sean Spence. Randy Shannon left the Hurricanes and was apparently not involved with the booster since he wasn't a fan of them anyways and was more focused on increasing academic standards for his team. Needing a new head coach that could help navigate a huge scandal, they would need a new head coach that could help them navigate a huge scandal, but would also leave a team that was now ineligible for bowl games, and the Hurricanes athletic department turned to Temple head coach Al Golden. Okay, so the point in me starting the video like that is to say that Miami football has had a lot of dysfunctions over the last 2 decades. The first half was plagued by scandal, and the last couple of years have been plagued by mediocrity and ultimately screwing up when it matters most. This is not the first time this has happened to the Canes. This year, last year, and even back in 2017, Miami had a legit shot of being in the playoff, but around Thanksgiving weekend, it was all but done. In today's video, we're going to talk about the dysfunction of the Miami Hurricanes program, talk about why they feel like the same team every year, and how this has to be torture for Miami fans. But before we get started, if you're a big fan of college football, be sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like if you support today's video, and let me know what player, team, topic, or situation I can cover next. Now let's get started and talk about Miami football. Okay, so going back to Al Golden, he brought in an almost entirely new staff to Miami, which included Jedd Fisch as his offensive coordinator and Mark Donofrio at defensive coordinator. The 2011 season started out rough as they lost to Maryland and followed that with a 24-6 win over Ohio State. That was an interesting game. They also lost to Kansas State, but would end up going 3-5 in the conference and would end the year at 6-6. Since they were ineligible for a bowl game, they didn't go to one. Ja'Cory Harris finished with 2,500 yards and 20 touchdowns. Lamar Miller became the star running back with 1,300 yards and 9 touchdowns. And then the receiving room had Tommy Streeter, Travis Benjamin, and Allen Hurns. All those guys put up decent numbers. They then would improve the following year to 7-5 with a 5-3 mark in the conference and ended 3rd place in the Coastal Division. The Hurricanes would end up getting blasted by Kansas State before then beating Bethune-Cookman, and they lost every single game to a ranked opponent that year. Stephen Morris was the quarterback, and he threw for nearly 3,400 yards and 21 touchdowns. Duke Johnson became the star running back with nearly 1,000 yards and 10 scores, and Philip Dorsett blossomed into one of the best receivers in the country. In 2013, the scandal was slowly behind them as they became eligible for bowl games again, and they took full advantage of this. They surged to a 9-4 season with a 5-3 mark in the ACC before losing to Louisville in the Russell Athletic Bowl. Jedd Fisch would leave the team to become the offensive coordinator in Jacksonville, and he was then replaced by James Coley. Stephen Morris and Duke Johnson had great seasons again, and Allen Hurns was the top guy. 2014 proved that 2013 was a fluke though. Miami fell back to a 6-7 record with a loss to South Carolina in the Independence Bowl. They then would improve back to 8-5 in 2015, but the athletic department still felt they weren't back to where they needed to be, especially since they hadn't won a bowl game since 2006. Miami fans flew a Fire Golden banner before games, and after a really bad loss to Clemson, Miami would fire Al Golden. They turned to alum and former Georgia head man Mark Richt to now lead the Hurricanes into 2016. Now we get to talk about Coach Richt. He was expected to bring in star power and stability to the program and bring Miami back to college football playoff appearances and being near the top of the ACC, and for a little while it looked like it was going to happen. He brought in big-time offensive coordinator Thomas Brown and also defensive coordinator Manny Diaz. The Canes had huge names on their roster including Mark Walton, Brad Kaya, Malik Rozier, and Vincent Testaverde. They also had the 12th best scoring defense in the country, but they still ended that year with a 9-4 record and good for 3rd in the Coastal Division, but they did win their first bowl game in 10 years. 2017 though really seems to mirror 2024. Miami would win their first 10 games of the year and had a couple of near misses, but after beating number 3 Notre Dame, many thought that Miami was on the fast track to the college football playoff. But as Thanksgiving weekend rolled around, they lost to a true freshman in Kenny Pickett against Pittsburgh, who was terrible that year, and that dropped them from 2nd to 7th. They then lost number 1 Clemson in the ACC championship game, dropping them out of the college football playoff entirely. Afterwards, they then proceeded to lose to Wisconsin in their own backyard, as they would lose in the Orange Bowl. 2017 was a lot like this year's team, as they had some star power, had a strong year, and many thought that Miami could finally pull it off. I know it's kind of a crime to compare that Pitt team to the Syracuse team, but no offense, this is still a game that Miami was expected to win, and they were in the driver's seat, but then it all fell apart at the last minute. 2018 would prove to be the last year for the Mark Richt regime, as the team fell to 7-6 and 4-4 in the ACC. They would lose to Wisconsin again in the Pinstripe Bowl, and Mark Richt would announce his retirement. Miami would then elevate Manny Diaz to the head coaching position for the 2019 campaign, pulling him away from Temple. Diaz's campaign started out with a close loss to Florida in Week 1, and ended the year with losses to Florida International, Duke, and then Louisiana Tech in the Independence Bowl. Miami had the 90th ranked offense behind freshman quarterback Jaron Williams and N'Kosi Perry, and then DJ Dallas at running back. They improved to 8-3 the following year in 2020, thanks in large part to D'Eriq King. This was another season in which Miami was really hyped up, as they had brought in a big-time quarterback out of the portal, started out strong, and many thought that King was a Heisman contender. But by the end of the season, Miami had fallen off. While King did throw for 2,700 yards and 23 touchdowns, they still ended up getting blown out by Clemson and then lost to North Carolina, and also lost their bowl game to Oklahoma State. At the end of the year, Miami always fell apart. They then fell back to 7-5 in 2021 after losing in Week 1 against Alabama, and they ended up finishing 5-3 in the conference. Miami decided that enough was enough, and they ended up deciding to move on from Manny Diaz, firing him at the end of the 2021 season. They would try once again to get another alum, as they brought in former Hurricane tackle Mario Cristobal from Oregon to be their new head coach. He had just gone 35-13 in 5 years at Oregon, and in his first year with the Canes, the team went 5-7 as he rebuilt the team. So now we get to some seasons that I'm really going to focus on, and that is both 2023 and 2024. Starting out in 2023, Cristobal's second year saw improvement. The ACC moved away from the divisional structure, meaning that Miami would have to be in the top 2 in the conference in order to make the conference championship game. Tyler Van Dyke was the starting quarterback for most of the year, leading the ACC in completion percentage, throwing for 2,700 yards with 19 touchdowns and 12 picks. But the ground game suffered for Miami. Xavier Restrepo became one of the top wideouts in the nation, but despite this, Miami's offense finished the year ranked just 39th in points per game, and their defense was 45th. They finished the year at 7-6, with a staggering 5 losses in the ACC. But, as I said, this is a Miami trend. They started out the year 4-0, as they had wins over Miami of Ohio, Bethune-Cookman, Temple, and then a big win over number 23 Texas A&M. They're getting a ridiculous amount of hype, and they're ranked number 17th in the country going into a game against Georgia Tech. They ended up losing that game 20-23, mainly because of that unbelievably dumb decision to run the ball instead of taking a knee. In case you don't know, Miami decided to run the ball, they fumbled it, Georgia Tech got it back, and a couple of plays later, Haynes King had a late touchdown, and Georgia Tech would win a nearly impossible game. This was one of those Miami moments, and they would fall from there. They lost ranked games against number 12 North Carolina, number 4 Florida State, and number 10 Louisville, each by an average of 8 points, before finally dropping their last game against Rutgers. Miami had seen decent improvement in 2023, but were once again plagued by losing to the best teams and having a ridiculously stupid loss at a bad time, which killed momentum. That's where we get to 2024. Miami was sick and tired of this crap, so they decided to go out and get a really good roster in the portal. They lost Henry Parrish to Ole Miss at running back, but instead they brought in one of the top guys in the portal, Damian Martinez from Oregon State. Tyler Van Dyke was now off to Wisconsin, so they went out and got Cam Ward, the best quarterback in the portal in my eyes, who had been an established winner at both Incarnate Word and Washington State. Ward and Martinez were one of the best quarterback and running back duos in the country, and they also had brought back Xavier Restrepo, who was one of the top receivers in the ACC. There were some question marks about the defense, but Miami should have such an insane offense that it wouldn't matter. Failure to reach the ACC championship game would have been seen as failure going into this year, and there was a couple of important games that were circled on the calendar. As I said, they decided to hit the portal really hard and got those big names in Damian Martinez and Cam Ward. Another underrated guy was Jacoby George, and they were put up there with Clemson and Florida State as the top 3 teams in the ACC going into 2024. While Florida State fell off the face of the earth immediately with a loss in Ireland to Georgia Tech, Miami instantly started out with a blowout over rival Florida, 41-17 in the Swamp, and this would propel them to number 12 in the country. They would then proceed to put up huge numbers in games against Florida A&M, Ball State, and USF, scoring 56, 62, and 50 points in those games. After a close call at home against Virginia Tech, which honestly, according to replay standards, they should have lost, some were starting to say that Miami was fraudulent and it was a race against time before they lost. After being down double digits on the road against California, they found a way to come back and win 39-38. Okay, Miami was on life support at this point, but it seemed like this year's team was a little bit different. They had star power and seemingly had the luck to make up for some close and lackluster moments. Sadly though, while the offense was great, their defense was not. Their defense was getting carved up each and every week, leading Miami to always have to either win shootouts or comebacks. They would manage to right the ship against a bad Florida State team, before then having an impressive win against Duke at home the following week, leading them to being ranked at 4th in the college football playoff poll and potentially looking at a first-round bye in the playoffs if they won out. All they'd have to do is beat Georgia Tech, Wake Forest, and Syracuse to end the year. Georgia Tech was seen as an average team in the ACC, Wake Forest likely wasn't going to make a bowl, and Syracuse, you didn't really know what to expect with them. But, just like a couple of years ago, there was some baffling coaching decisions against Georgia Tech, which led the Yellow Jackets to being able to upset Miami 28-23. Cam Ward had 350 passing yards and 3 touchdowns, but this wasn't enough to keep the Hurricanes in front, especially with Haynes King and that Jacket offense bleeding all that clock with a triple option kind of like offense. Miami's offense got suffocated, and the defense, like it had been a problem all year, could not stop the Jackets. Miami fell to 8th in the polls, but it still looked like a lock to be a top 4 seed. They would just have to win against Wake Forest and then knock off Syracuse. But the Canes found a way to lose again, this time to the Orange. In the last game of the season, after Thanksgiving, they lost 42-38. They had an opportunity to tie the game late on 4th and goal, but instead of going for that, they would decide to kick it, and they never saw the ball again, as we all expected. Once again, the defense was a huge problem, and this loss was especially bad because they were at one point up by nearly 20 points, and they now fell behind Clemson in the ACC standings to 3rd, meaning they would not be able to play in the ACC championship game, and their spot in the college football playoff is now in serious jeopardy. Okay, so why does the same thing happen with Miami every year? Despite having all this talent, they always seem to fail. The obvious answer falls on the coaches. They've had some pretty good head coaches throughout the last few years and ever since they joined the ACC in 2004, but those coaches have never been able to surround themselves with either championship level talent or championship level assistant coaches and coordinators. For example, despite having the second best scoring offense in the country this year, their defense is allowing 24 points per game, good for 60th in the country. If you ignore those first 4 blowout losses, Miami is allowing almost 31 points per game, and that weakness is enough for any team to exploit and win games against the Canes. Offensive coordinators have had these problems too, as in 2022, Josh Gaddis only averaged 23.6 points per game, and their defensive coordinators, Kevin Steele and Charlie Strong, put out defenses that ranked 68th in the nation. Coach Richt could not find an offense that worked either, as Thomas Brown ended up not being great, and Al Golden's offense ranked 71st and defense ranked 77th. Another problem has been the quarterback play for the Canes. Aside from Brad Kaya and Cam Ward, Miami has thrown out quarterbacks like Malik Rozier, N'Kosi Perry, Jerem Williams, and even Tate Martell. These were all guys that I kept hearing about having high ceilings, but I never really felt like they did much of anything. Jake Garcia is another one. Even De'Aaron King, who was a really good player, got hurt in 2021 and his production fell off hard. Okay, so how do they fix this? Well, there's really one obvious way to fix the Hurricanes if you're Mario Cristobal. Hire better assistant coaches. Guys like Rhett Lashley have proven to be good, but if you want to compete with teams at the highest level, you have to be willing to commit to getting some of the best coaches on both the offensive and defensive side of the ball at the same time. Look for defensive coordinators like Penn State's Tom Allen, Tennessee's Tim Banks, or even bring back Al Golden to be the DC, considering how his defense is doing at Notre Dame right now. You could try to pay Tulane head coach John Sumrall to take a coordinator job, or even NC State's Tony Gibson, but you have to be able to have both an elite offense and defense in this modern level of college football. If Mario can't provide that for Miami, Miami needs to find a new head man. The second thing you have to do is not make stupid in-game decisions. I feel like Miami's team has been plagued by bad choices in games for as long as I can remember. Cutting down on those dramatically increases the Canes' likelihood of winning those close games. Miami's been doing pretty well on the recruiting trail these last few years, ranking 10th in 2025, 6th in 2024, 8th in 2023, and 13th in 2022. But those high-ceiling players have to be developed as well, so a focus on getting the most out of those guys is something that you have to be able to do at the forefront. At the end of the day, there's a few things that ended up making Miami the same disappointing team each and every year. It falls on the head coach because of these mistakes, and these last few coaches have just not been able to develop talent or bring in the right coordinators at the right time. They always lose games they shouldn't, have hair-pulling moments, and always have a couple of things that are just unequal on the roster. We'll have to wait and see what happens to Miami. Maybe they squeak in and get that 12th seed spot, maybe they get left out, or who really knows. This could be the beginning of the end for the Mario Cristobal era, as many Canes fans are not happy, and they are sick and tired of losing. Luckily, there are 12 spots instead of 4 now, so it will be easier for the Canes to make the playoffs, but changes need to happen soon, and right now it's kind of sad because Miami truly does feel like the same team each and every year. But But what do you guys think? If you're a Canes fan, what the heck is wrong with this program, and what other topic or team should I cover next? Be sure to let me know down below, leave a like if you support today's video, subscribe if you're new, and check out some of the videos on the end screen. Hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.